In this episode, I want to talk about Christianity and the formation of mind. In the last episode, I talked about Christianity means kind of different things depending on the question that we're asking. Are we asking a question of theology, or are we asking a question of history, and so forth? And this discussion is the same. When we talk about the formation of mind, we're not talking principally about piety, though we could include that, or practice. So you think about these three things about Christianity. You think about piety, practice, and philosophy. So the piety of Christianity is that kind of sense of the spirit that we have when we're giving our life to Christ, or we're worshiping, and we have that kind of in charismatic language, a quickening, a kind of sense of inside ourselves. There's a responding, that there is a presence beyond ourselves in the room of transcendence, and all Christians believe in this, but we express it in different ways. There's a kind of on that score. There's a kind of a spectrum of being either contemplative or ecstatic on the other side. So contemplatives are your kind of more monastic tradition where you cultivate the stillness. This is true also of movement like Quakers, to where you're entering the stillness and quieting the mind and meditating on the things of God and entering in quietness and in reverence in the presence of God. And the ecstatic tradition is the opposite. It may include dance or loud expressions and movement of the body of different kinds. So a lot of that has to do with personality, but both of them are legitimate Christian expressions of piety. And then, of course, there's practice. Baptism and communion. We have endless arguments on how we're to do these things and how important they are and how we explain what they mean and so forth. But almost all Christians believe in baptism and communion because those are the two things that Christ himself commanded us to do. And along with these are many other things that we have a particular view of marriage and so forth. And so this comes out of our practice. Philosophy is about the formation of mind, and it in ancient times it included discussions about practice, but it's also about how our thoughts are formed by what we claim to believe and what we say is true about reality. Christ himself is the one that opens this up when he says, "Come unto me, all you that are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me." And he says this in many ways throughout his teaching. I want you to learn what I am teaching you. I want it to be a way of life for you. And we get this throughout the New Testament, that we are taking on a new way of thinking. If you want to know a little bit about, here's an excellent book, Jesus the Great Philosopher, Jonathan Pennington. He's done an extraordinary work about, get this right in the cameras, there it is. He's done an extraordinarily good work on this, and it's published by Brazos Press, which is a evangelical press. And if you want to see it from a non-Christian viewpoint, the more philosophical viewpoint, then it's this book, Philosophy as a Way of Life, Pierre Hadot. It's a wonderful book. I've read it several times. The man is not a Christian, but he does talk about how Christianity, early Christianity, formed in a context of philosophical schools in the ancient world. And he tells us that in those days, philosophy was not merely a discussion on, what is real, what is not, how does one think, how does one not, but also how does one behave in order to become a good person. I always think about the story that Bill Cosby told in his comedy sketches many, many years ago about how being in school he had dated a girl that was a philosophy major, and he took her overlooking the city, and it was a moonlit night, and he was all ready for some passionate necking. And the girl looked deep in his eyes and said, "Bill, why is there air?" And he said, "That's when I knew that one should not date a philosophy student." So, I sympathize with him, and I'm sure anyone that's married to someone with a philosophical bent will understand what he's talking about. But philosophy is about examining one's thoughts. It's not just examining what one sees and believes, but why one believes and sees these things, and what's the filters through which one looks at the world. And Christianity has a particular history of this and a great legacy of teaching us what are the implications of Scripture and the things that we claim to believe about Christ. One of the most fruitful and early discussions about this was about the Gospel of John and the Epistle to the Hebrews. So it's called the Logos Doctrine, and it centers in on that introduction of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. The word is logos there in Greek, and there's another word in that phrase in the beginning. He uses the Greek word arche, and both of these words have a particular philosophical history as well as common usage. And so there's always been discussion about whether he's just making a statement that's applicable to anybody, anywhere, or whether he's intentionally using these two words in the philosophical context of his time. But anyway, the idea of in the beginning is the logos, or the word, has a real significance for us in our times as we begin to talk about AI programs, artificial intelligence, of people claiming that they're sentient, or we experience them as sentient. Sentient means that they can feel, that they have they're ensouled. They have a sense of their own self. They're self-aware, self-conscious. And this discussion will intensify. Many people that deal a lot with these programs believe that they are much more than simply the data inputting coming back. I don't believe that. I believe they're not sentient, and I believe that not only because of my faith, but because just the way that I see the world. But I do understand why people believe them to be sentient. We believe Mickey Mouse is sentient. My daughter, when she was little, used to cry at the Mickey Mouse version of Christmas Carol because little tiny Tim was Mickey Mouse, and he only had one pea on his plate, and he was kind of dividing his one pea, and there was about to eat his one pea, and my little girl cried and said, "Oh, he only has one pea to eat." And that's what we call anthropomorphizing, making something appear to be human that's not. Of course, it was a cartoon, and even if it had been a mouse, it would still, but we anthropomorphize things. It's the biblical description of that is idolatry, making something not only like God, but putting something in the place where human beings are supposed to be. And I think we're about to do that with robotics and artificial intelligence program. So we have to be careful with that. But we have to know why this is important from a spiritual standpoint. Why would Christians care about this? And what does it have to do with our faith? If your faith is only about piety or practice, then you may think it has nothing to do with your faith. But if your faith is also a philosophy that is not only something that is a part of your life, but the core of your life through which you see everything else, then understanding Christianity as a formation of mind becomes very important to you. Thanks for tuning in.